So my name is Matt Navare, and go ahead and share my main screen here. And I am the owner and founder of MSN Media, and we're going to be talking about a technique that I've been using for a lot of my clients for the last quite a few years called RecentRecords. And it's been lately in the last few months, we've really honed this particular solution down and gotten it really, really distilled to the smallest, easiest to configure and integrate a system that we could build. And then today we're actually releasing it out to the world for free. So a little bit about my business. I've been a database developer since 1983, and with MSN Media, my company, since '89. We're an FBA Platinum company, a FileMaker reseller. I'm certified in every version of FileMaker that you can have a couple of excellence awards, and we have an office in downtown Portland with a beautiful view of the city. We really love living in the Pacific Northwest. We also do FileMaker training, we do coaching, and we have a lot of experience. So we really love FileMaker even after all this time working with it. For fun, I do the FileMaker Talk podcast with Matt Petrowski, which you can get for free on iTunes. I'm a musician, take a lot of photos wherever I travel. I ride my bike whenever I can. And I really have a kind of a weird geeky hobby with large FileMaker data sets. In past years, I've imported all of the raw data from Wikipedia and a whole bunch of other data sources, and I even built some databases with 1 billion, all the way up to 3 or 4 billion records in FileMaker, just to see how FileMaker would work with really, really large sets of data. Also, I'm the original founder of the Portland FileMaker Meetup group, and we meet every month and have for the last 15 or so years. These are some of my guitars. These are some photos I've taken when I was in Africa a couple of years ago. I love that photo, really hits me. Those are 2 of my nieces. So RecentRecords, what does it do? So let's take a quick look at what it does. Jump into FileMaker here. Get rid of this. Here we go. So this is the solution that we're giving away. It's just called FM RecentRecords. And the way it works is if you're looking at a record and you view a detail of a specific record. So if I'm just going through the list and I click on Carter Associates here, then when I go back to my dashboard or main menu, it lists Carter Associates as my most recently viewed record and shows that I viewed it 0 minutes ago. With one click, I'm back at that record. If I go back to my dashboard and click on some different record, like maybe this invoice down here for data precision, now I'm looking at that particular record, so it basically takes over the navigation as well as the displaying of those records. And then with one click, I'm back to my menu, and I can see that is my most recently viewed record. Let's see. I'm getting notes that the audio might be problematic, so if anyone has a problem, please click and let me know. Send me a note. Or maybe even text me. My contact info is at the slide at the end, but my phone number, which you can always use to reach me, is 503-880-6288. So let's see. So as you can see, this system shows data from different tables, which is pretty neat. That's definitely one of its main features. It shows me, in this particular example, invoice data, company data, and also contact data, so I can look at a particular person's name. If I can click on Shirley's record here, it takes me to her record. And as I click a specific person, that record then becomes my most recently viewed record, and it scrolls to the top of the list. So that's basically kind of what this is. What is involved with it, you might ask? So more than when I really look at this system from years past, there used to be a trend a bunch of years ago, and several different developers came out with solutions for it, which was a back button, which was a way that you could, as you're navigating in your FileMaker solution, you could easily, actually not so easily because you had to lay a lot of breadcrumbs for them to work, but you could integrate a back button so that a user could click back, and kind of go back through to previous screens you've seen. Those can be problematic in FileMaker because sometimes you'll delete a record And then if you click to some other record and you want to go back, the user might expect to go back to a record which has now been deleted. It may have been the last record in the table, so now there's no records at all to view. So there's a lot of potential problems with that in a ever-changing database kind of a situation. And that actually can also be a problem with recent records, because you could delete a record and then go back to the recent record, and now that record is no longer there. So, but really what I wanted to build with this was more of a solution that was like a web history in a web browser than a back button solution. So it could take a look back over a long time. So for example, in my browser here, if I look at pages I've looked at, I can click back if I'm looking at some particular page and go back to some previous page or something like that. And I'll see this, you want to submit your form again, kind of a thing. But if I go to my web history, I can see other pages I've looked at recently, and I can even go to earlier today and see other things I've looked at. And if I go and open up my full history, it shows me my history all the way to the beginning of time with everything, which is pretty nice. And of course, sometimes you want to clear that because there's stuff in there that you want people to see, but in a database, really that shouldn't be the case. The other thing that's really important and cool about this particular solution, other than the fact that it is free and available from msnmedia.com, is that you can integrate it in just a few minutes. We're actually going to be doing an integration so that you can see exactly what those steps are here in a few minutes. We've integrated this, like I said, in virtually every one of our customer systems, and I've gotten it down to just probably about 5 minutes or so for a really fast integration. Once it's integrated, then you can configure it, and the integration or configuration takes just a couple of more minutes for each table that you want to add, so it's really fast. Another thing that I really like about it is it not only shows you records that you've seen, but that actually works for every user, and it works in a way that survives logout and login or closing and opening of a file, whether the file is hosted or not. Works on FileMaker Pro and Go, Mac and Windows, and is optimized for a WAN environment. So it runs really, really well, even over a really slow linked database. A lot of times when users are looking for a record, so think about a really good scenario here. The accountant for some company is looking up at a record. It's 11:59, just before she's headed out the office for lunch. She looks up a record, and the customer says that they wanted to check on some invoices that have been sent, and she looks them up, and then she goes, oh my God, I'm meeting my friend for lunch. I got to run out the door. So she logs out of the database because she's, that's what you're supposed to do. Comes back into the office after lunch and goes, oh, who was that I was looking for? I can't remember their name. Was their name Joe? He said his name. So she remembers that she's got something to do, but she cannot remember who it was that she saw. So that scenario is something that I bet happens really, really frequently to pretty much all users of FileMaker in any system where the data set is larger than a couple hundred records. So this recent record really solves that problem quite nicely. Also, it really simplifies navigation because you don't really need to build all the other navigation scripts and stuff like that. It just shows you right from that portal on your dashboard a quick single click to get back to the record that you were looking at. And then the dashboard, there's really been a kind of a trend in the last few years of putting dashboards on as the main menu in systems. And I think that's a great trend. And this really reinforces that to really use those even more. What does it require to integrate this? Well, very, very little. Actually, all you really need is an ID field. In earlier versions of the solution, it required a UUID, but now we've actually figured out a way to work with just an ID, even like a numeric number, for example. Or if you use the full get UUID function in FileMaker, it works with that beautifully. And as I said, it works on the LAN or the WAN. Works beautifully with FileMaker Go. So the list of fields, so to integrate the solution, there's just a few steps which we'll get to. One of them is you copy and paste a couple of tables in or import some tables in to your solution. And one of the key tables is the one called RecentRecords, which has one record that represents each record that you viewed in whatever table you viewed it in. And that record in this new table tracks the name of the table, so for example, contact or invoice or company, a short description of what the text was, which is actually what shows up on the dashboard, the ID of the record in that original table, and the date and time that record was viewed. Really, really simple. There's another table that has just two fields. It has the device ID, which is that unique ID that FileMaker gives us, and also a return separated list of all of the IDs that is saved. So basically when you close and open the system, that device ID, so there's an on database open kind of a trigger. There's a few triggers that we'll be adding to the solution to make this work. The on record load on the menu loads up that particular device ID, goes to the particular record for that user or for that device, and then loads the list of recently viewed records, which then displays them on the menu through the portal, which means that there's going to be one very, very simple relationship that will also need to be added. If you have an existing system that does security, where you have proper, users and privilege sets, and you've got like a secondary level of security, a table in your system that has users, you can integrate this system with that rather than using sort of the device ID method. That way, if a user logs in from 2 or 3 different computers, they can actually see their combined list of records from all of those computers. So how do we integrate it? This is really the meat of what we're here to do today. So we've got our raw solution here, and I've got integration instructions here. There's 5 steps for installation and 5 steps for integration. And if we go to another window I've got is one of the demo files from a FileMaker training. And so right now this is a customer system that has customers and products and orders and stuff like that. But when we go to its dashboard, what we see is this incomplete and complete little widget here. And let's say that we don't find that particularly useful, so we're going to use something else instead. How do we integrate this? So the first step is we copy these 2 tables in, recent record and device record, copy those to the clipboard, go over to the other solution and paste. The second step is we grab one particular field, which is a global field, from my dashboard. So if I go to my dashboard here, there's one field called recent record list, which is a global. And I'm going to paste that field into my resources table, which is the primary table in this particular solution. The next step is to build my one and only relationship from that new global field to the ID field in the recent records table in my solution. So go to my graph. Here's my RR recent record, and here's my RR device record, 2 tables. And in my recent record one, I'm going to link down here. I think the resource table's down here a little bit. Here we go, Z resources. And by the way, here's a good little FileMaker tip. Rather than dragging the exact field that you want or opening up your window, a really good way to connect a relationship between 2 tables in the graph is just to randomly grab any 2 things and then hit Command O or Control O, because right now the relationship itself is selected, which brings up this interface, which is vastly easier. And in this particular one, I can just choose my recent record list to ID, click Change, and now my relationship is changed. Move this table occurrence over here. I have a need to make sure my graphs are clean, so I'll do that. So that's all I do for the graph. The other table occurrence on the graph there can just hang out all by itself. It doesn't require any relationships at all. My next step is there's a folder of scripts in here. This folder right here, copy that to the clipboard, go over here and paste. Oh, this is some ones from my training class there. And let's see, my next step is to, there's a portal on my main menu here, this portal here. I'm going to put this on the clipboard. Copy that. So this one here, I'm going to move off my screen. Oh, I think that one widget is locked there. Let me grab that, move this off, and then paste my other one. It looks like it doesn't quite fit, so I'll make it a little shorter. And maybe move it over a little bit here. Notice that it actually correctly resolved already. It's showing RR recent records because once I pasted my table in, it automatically added those 2 table occurrences to my graph. So my portal is there. It doesn't yet do anything. That's actually it for the installation part. I can now, if I know the rest of the steps, close this file, and I never need this file again. All the elements have been 100% copied into my solution at this point. So the next part is to start configuring it. So there's just a couple of really small things to do. One of them is on the specific records that I want to see. So for example, I've got one called customer here. If I'm looking at this particular customer screen, if someone views this record, so in other words, not the list record, because if they're looking at the list, they haven't really looked at the customer. But if they click on Plants of the World, they have viewed, in my opinion, they have actually viewed this record. So on this record, I'm going to put a trigger, and I'm going to call a script. In this particular demo file from FileMaker, I think there's already a trigger on it. It already calls one called set default contact order, some long thing. So what I can do is I can just go to my script space, workspace, and find that one. And I already forgot its name. I think it's some really long one. Yeah, set default contact. So I can go here and just search for it. There it is. So on this script, rather than modifying it or messing with it, I'm just going to go ahead and make a new step here called perform script. And the script I'm going to perform is one of the 3 default ones that got pasted in on record load company. And notice that that's in a folder called edit these. Okay, so there's my script trigger. Now I'm going to go edit that script because we have to look at this one and make a couple of changes. For one, this is actually customer, not company, so I want to call it the exact same thing. And there's just a few really small changes I need to make. One, I have to set the primary key for the table, which is going to be the ID field. 2, I need a friendly name for the table. We like to call it customer, not company. And 3, a friendly description of what data is viewed when you view a record in this table. For example, customer name, and maybe a couple of spaces, and the phone number, for example. We could put as much or as little as you want on here. So maybe I'll put the email on here too, huh? If you have a single field that describes it, you can put all kinds of other formatting or whatever you want on here. But in this example, let's just put those 3 things on. That's it. This table has now been configured so that when I load the record on this table by simply going to browse mode, I have viewed that record. The next thing I need to do is back on my dashboard screen. This didn't show up yet because there's one small thing we need to do here, which is on my dashboard, I need to attach a script trigger to here. This doesn't have one yet, so I'm going to put an on record load script trigger here. And that's going to run the one called on menu load. So that script also will have to have minor edits to it. And all it really needs to do there is it needs to set the global field that I pasted in. And that global field is called G recent records list. That gets set to a SQL command, which grabs the IDs from the persistent ID table, which we don't need to mess with. That all automatically will just work. But that's using that other table occurrence. And look at that, it already is there. So the recently viewed record that I just looked at, if I went back to customers and clicked on a few more customers and went back to my dashboard, they're going to be on the list just like that. There's one final step for configuration, which is the script that runs when I click one of these lines, and that's the script called toRecent. So toRecent just needs a few little things. It grabs the friendly name of the table that you clicked on. So in this case, customer. And so if I click on the table called, in this case, customer, the layout that it's going to go to is the layout that I want in my system, which is going to be customer detail. And the field, which is the ID field in this table, is customer ID. That's it. So that table has now been configured. You can see we have some space in here for the next ones, but let's actually just test this one to see how this works before we go to the next step. So now if I click on Zen Garden Consultants, it works just like that. So I can close this solution and then go to Open Recent, and it reloads all my records. Even if this was a hosted solution, it would actually reload my records. And it's doing that because there's two new tables down here that usually I would hide, but the device record table has an ID for my device and a list of the 3 records that I've seen. For demo purposes, we can make this bigger. And as I view records, they're going to automatically populate the IDs here. The second table has 1 record for every record that I've looked at in every single table that I've looked at it, and also the date and time, and then it tracks how long ago it was. So this was a minute ago, this was 0 minutes ago. It automatically uses this like friendly calculation, which is when that record was viewed, which I find much nicer than just the date and time to give you that context. So usually what I would do here is go to my Manage Layouts and turn these 2 layouts off, because users typically don't need to see them on the list. All right, so go back home, and now what do I do if I wanted to integrate orders as well? So for example, if I click on right now an Elegant Environmental and then I go home, this doesn't show me that. But if it looks like my portal is a little bit messed up here too for my training file. But if I go to this one here, this also, I think, has a script trigger called onRecordLoadOrder. And I have 2 choices here. So what I could do is I could either find that onRecordLoadOrder and perform a script in here, or I could actually take the contents of one of my demo scripts here and copy it into onRecordLoadOrder. And then just modify the 2 or 3 things that I need to do to make this work. So again, I'm on order, so my primary key is order ID. My friendly table name is order. And the information that I want to display when I click a record here is probably the customer name. Let's see, what other fields might I want to see? Probably the order ID and the customer name. That's going to be order customer name. And this couple spaces, and then maybe the dollar amount of the order. So that'd be the order total, and which I could put a dollar sign in here. And that's it for that. Notice, by the way, that it's running a script called PSOS for perform script on server. There's a script that we don't really need to mess with, which actually is the one that does all the work for that recent record. And if you have the solution hosted on a server, that script runs server side. And if not, then it runs locally. So the script actually will call itself automatically. So you have some simple changes you can make here if it's hosted. And but really, you don't need to mess with this. You can just read it if you want to kind of see what it's doing. But it's very simple. It basically just goes to that recent record table, sees if that record already exists that you viewed. If it does exist, it updates its count and its date viewed, updates the count by 1 and puts the date viewed. If it does not exist, it makes a brand new record and then tracks that. So this that's pretty much all that does. Let's see, and then the other thing we need to do is on toRecent. If the table is order, then go to the layout. This is actually all happening in find mode here. Notice what it does is it goes to find mode, goes to the order, goes to the proper layout, and sets the proper field. Then it goes to find mode, and then it's already on the right layout. Or if the record was deleted, then it actually cleans up after itself and deletes that recent record. which is a nice feature. So in other words, if you try to view a record that you or someone else deleted, it tells you right then, yeah, that record's gone. I can't show you it anymore. You could also set up other methods to do that so that upon deletion of a record, it deletes the recent record so that no user would see it on their list. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to go to order ID. And now my second table is wired up. If I view an order or two and go back to my dashboard, I see orders and customers. So if I click on an order like Peaceful Garden, it goes right to that. If I click on a customer like Flatter Your Garden, it goes right to that. So I wasn't looking at my clock, but I think that was probably 10 minutes or so of a complete and pretty detailed integration and configuration of the solution into a file that I didn't build. So this goes really, really well into many different types of databases. So let's see. That's basically what we've got there. Let me go back to my slides. So what do we have for summary? We have one lesson that I've definitely learned, and the way that we came up with this particular solution was carefully observing how users use their database. What do they do? Sitting behind a user who's new to your system, or even one who's been using a system for a really long time, and just watching without any kind of judgment or any kind of prompting or anything like that. And I've noticed that they really very frequently went to, did queries or researches or, other ways that they went back to records they looked at from various silly ways. They could have gone, back to the list and scrolled to the last record, or they could have done another find, by whatever way that FileMaker users go look at records. And it's vastly simpler to have them just click on the record from the list, I find. So you can add instant value to your solutions by simply putting this in there. This is my contact information. As I said, I gave you my phone number at the beginning. Would love to hear from you. So you can feel free to go to my website. We've got a blog, send me an email or call or text me if you have any questions about this solution. Next month,